Do you ever wish that you could clone yourself so you could keep up with absolutely everything? Because I sure do. This week's guest is all about delegating so you can get some of that valuable time back. Ashley Cox is a leadership coach. She's all about helping female entrepreneurs stop taking on too much and start leading with clarity and confidence. With over 20 years of experience guiding teams from local businesses to multi-million-dollar corporations, she has seen it all. And she's here to share some of her insights with us today on Rebel Mom Boss. Hey, Ashley, thanks for being here.
Hey, Robin. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here. I love talking with really interesting, smart women for this podcast. And fortunately, there is no shortage of them.
Yes, your guests are like the most amazing. So it is an honor to be included among them. Thank you.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about your journey to start. So you kind of went from the traditional corporate HR role and then transitioned into coaching. How did that come to be?
It's a really interesting story. I had no idea that this whole online business world even existed because I was so entrenched in the corporate world. And so I got my start as an hourly employee who then moved into management and then HR with Kroger. And then I spent some time with J. Crew. So we're talking massive multi-billion-dollar organizations, loads of employees, hundreds of thousands of people. I've personally led teams of 350 plus myself. And so I know what it's like to be in charge of a bunch of people and a bunch of personalities. And so when my husband's job started kind of moving us around, I was like, I've always wanted to start a business. Let me see what this would be like. And at that point in time, I was actually pretty burnout in HR. So I started a photography business first. And that was my first foray into business ownership and online entrepreneurship. And when I got online, I was like, what are all these people doing? And a lot of moms, a lot of women creating their own spaces, creating their own businesses, their own paths, and fleeing really is the right word, the corporate world, because it's not made for working moms. And so as I was doing this photography business, I would see questions come up about things related to HR and to leadership. And I would be answering these questions like, hey, like here's some support, here's an answer, here's a link to something. This would be really helpful. And eventually people were like, why are you not doing this as a job? We need you. And this was 9 years ago. And so no one was doing HR consulting. People were doing leadership development, but nobody was really focusing on this micro industry of women business owners online creating careers for themselves that fit their lifestyles. And I was like, me, I can do that. So that's how I ended up doing this work. And it has been such a joy helping women create businesses that are radically different from the types of toxic corporate work environments that we've almost all experienced.
Yeah. And I feel like when we talk about those corporate work environments, like the definition of what we consider professional is pretty much how like middle-aged white men behave in the workplace, yes. Right? That's what's professional. Mm-hmm. And anything that deviates from that is considered unprofessional, mm-hmm. which really isn't the case because you can be a mom and professional at the same time. Like there's this understanding that you need to be at work in your desk from 9 to 5. Fortunately the pandemic shifted that mm-hmm. mindset for a lot of us. We realized we can work from home, we can do multiple things at the same time. And that was really a turning point for me because my job switched to remote, which is wild because I work in radio. Obviously, we can broadcast from wherever we are, right? Yes. And I did it successfully for 2 years during the pandemic. And then they were like, okay, everybody come back now. And I was like, well, now I have a daughter. Like things have changed mm-hmm. and that doesn't work for me anymore. So that's when I was like, hey, I'm going to start my own business. And I am both happy and sad that women are doing this. I'm sad that we have to, basically, that we can't find spaces that will accommodate our lifestyle. But I'm also happy because we are thriving. Like, I feel like yes. everyone I talk to, I don't know if this is, you work specifically with women, but my experience has been women make the best business owners because yes. man, do we know how to multitask.
And we're problem solvers. We're fixers. We don't let roadblocks get in our way because literally everything in our lives is crafted as a roadblock to us. And so I love working with women. A lot of times I'll have people say like, do you ever work with men? And I'm like, I rarely let the guys come in and play. Like you got to be really, really special. But I'm here to help give women the permission themselves. Like, I don't give you permission. You give yourself permission to have a voice, to create something radically different, to work in a way that is magical and supportive and nurturing of you and your family and your goals, and not what we've known in the past. Because what a lot of times I see happening is that women start businesses and they incrementally create a business that mirrors what their experience was, because that's all they've known. And so it's hard to break free of that until you see something different, until somebody asks you questions that you've not been asked before. You know, if you could do this completely differently than you're doing it right now, what might that look like? Because you don't have to do it the way that the Krogers and the J. Crews and the Walmarts and the big boys of the world have been playing. This is our time to create something that's truly special and unique. And also, not just for yourself, but for the women that you hire. And most of the women that I work with have all female teams, which I love. And it's just another opportunity for you to, if not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, not everyone is cut out to be a business owner. It's a lot of risk. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of creativity that goes into it. But we need people who want to work for us and want to do work in a way that feels nurturing and supportive. And we get to create that for other women too. So it's not just about us, it's about that impact ripple that we get to create in our businesses, in our communities, and in the world around us.
I feel like also as, you know, millennials, so like late Gen X, millennial into like the later Gen Zs, we're really well positioned for switching up leadership styles because we're already doing it as moms, right? The way we parent our kids is so vastly different from the way we were parented. We are breaking those generational curses. You know, we're very tuned into making sure that we don't traumatize our children. And I feel like that carries over into leadership in the workplace, right? Like, we've worked in terrible environments and we know what didn't work for us and we know what not to do with our employees. Like, for example, for me with the women that I work with, I offer paid menstrual leave because, you know, I have been sitting at a desk doubled over in pain, in agony, running to the bathroom every hour because my period was so heavy, you know, and having to like grin and smile and not let on what you're going through. Like, that makes no sense to me. And anytime I would have conversations with men about it, they'd be like, well, if you get paid leave, then we have to give it to the men too. And I'm like, but they're not in pain 3 days a week. Like, it's not like I'm taking, you know, this time off to go to the beach and have fun. Like, I'm literally in throwing up. Like, this is awful.
Yeah.
So for me, that was really, really important to make sure that women felt supported, to be like, you take care of your bodies. So
I love that.
Yeah, I'm curious for you, like what you've seen from women in the way they lead that is different.
Oh, I love this conversation so much, Robin. Thank you for inviting this. I literally just had a friend yesterday, Mary Beth Storjahan, who is brilliant in her own right and is in the financial industry. So she's a powerhouse in a very male-dominated organization. And she just talked about this and the cost of women, the cost of time, the cost of products, the cost of procedures that sometimes we have to have. And I loved in the comments, one woman said, I always like to think anything a man can do, I can do bleeding. And I was like, yeah.
Oh my God, I love that.
Right? So it feels empowering, and it's also disempowering when workplaces aren't built for our very human bodies that we all experience some variety of this. And it's a huge spectrum, right? So maybe not everyone needs to take advantage of, a menstrual PTO time, but some might, and some might need a little bit more because their bodies are different. Some other strategies or other policies and things I've seen women put into place that are really supportive. Mental health days are a big one that I'm seeing right now. A lot of women are saying, you know what? It's tough. It's tough to be an employee. It's tough to be a mom. It's tough to live in this world right now. If you need to take a day off, we offer mental health days. Use them as you need them. And some of them have, like you get one a month or you get, 3 a quarter, or however you might need to use them. Some have unlimited. So you take care of you and you come back to work better and happier, because we know that when we take care of our mental health, we're happier, we're more productive, we're more engaged, we're more loyal. And those are things that matter to businesses because turnover is incredibly expensive. We're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. I recently had a client who had to terminate an employee for lots of various reasons, and it was a necessary termination. But she estimated it cost her $15,000 to lose that employee and replace them with someone else. Now, some things come into that, hiring decisions and whatnot, which we'll not get into today. But when we find good people, we need to put policies in place that support them. And I think anything that we can think of that we've experienced as a woman, maternity leave. We're in the States, right? Are you in the States, Robin?
I'm in Canada.
You're in Canada.
I have the glorious.
I know. I usually check, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't remember if Robin's in the States or in Canada. But y'all got good maternity leave, 12 to 18 months, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Here in the States, you're lucky if you pop that baby out and you're back at work in maybe 6 weeks. Ugh. And that's not all companies. That's just certain companies that have 50 employees or more, right? That's mandatory only for those companies, and it's unpaid. And so as women business owners, what I'm really seeing women do in the States specifically is we're creating maternity leave policies that support women from start to finish to step into one of the most beautiful periods of their life with support, with pay, with an opportunity to still come back to a career that they love and enjoy and contribute to in meaningful ways. You get me started on this topic, I'm ready to talk all day.
I get it because, I have lots of friends in the US. Like one of my old roommates lives in Boston. And so I've had conversations like this with women in the States. And after a year of maternity leave, my daughter only went to daycare part-time. I couldn't put her in, and I can't imagine at 6 weeks, like I also had an emergency C-section. At 6 weeks, I wasn't healed.
You get 8 weeks for emergency C-section. It's super generous.
Lovely. But like if you're breastfeeding or pumping, and then you've got mastitis and clogged ducts, and finding a way to pump with dignity.
Oh my God.
Is impossible. They don't give you spaces for that.
And if they do, it's a broom closet. And it's not set up for your comfort or your safety or your baby's safety and health. Like it is such an abomination. It really is.
It is. And then the mental health impact of that has to be horrific. Plus, you don't have subsidized daycare in the most parts of the U.S., where we also have subsidized daycare. So I'm in Quebec, which is, the French-Canadian part of Canada. We have had subsidized daycare since the 90s, since 1997. Yeah. So I grew up with subsidized daycare. Now my daughter is in subsidized daycare. And shockingly, Quebec has one of the highest rates of women in the workforce in the entire developed world. So the data exists. Maybe, I understand being afraid to make changes.
Yeah.
But if you can look to data in a neighboring country, which is very similar culturally to the United States, to me, that should be enough information. No?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Just a wee bit. But here's the thing. We continue to do the same things that don't work, and we get the same results. And then we wonder, what's wrong? Why don't women want to be in the workforce? Why are so many women starting businesses? Why are women not in more leadership positions? Because we don't create a career path or a company culture that allows women to step into those roles. And there's what they call the motherhood tax. You've heard of this, right? Oh, yeah. I'm sure everybody listening has heard of this. I think the guys are still catching up on what the motherhood tax is. But this is where you get penalized because you choose to have a family. And it wasn't just a solo decision in most situations. It was a spouse and a spouse having a conversation about, hey, let's have a family. And the one that has the children and stays home is the one that gets penalized because, now somebody has to be available for the child and somebody has to do this. And we don't have enough leave, paid or unpaid, to support women through that. And so anything that we can do creatively to think about, even if you're not a mom. So I'm going to give myself away. I'm not a mom, y'all. I'm not a mom. I work with a lot of moms. I love my moms because they are brilliant and creative and tenacious and committed to creating a better world for themselves and their children and the grandchildren. But what I love to see them doing is thinking differently and thinking outside of the box and saying, what would have been really supportive for me had I been in corporate? And how can I create that here? Now, here's the thing that can be a little frustrating sometimes. It does cost money, right? It costs a lot of money sometimes to implement these programs, especially if there's no government subsidization for that. So where can you start small now? Offering mental health days doesn't cost you anything. It might cost you somebody being out of the office for a day or two, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't cost your bottom line money. And we can always shift deadlines. I have a rule in my business. I'm like, there are no hard and fast deadlines. And I think that's something that is very different from corporate as well, because corporate is like, you die on the deadline, right? But in my business, I'm like, one of my team members, Mara, her little boy got super, super sick a couple of years ago, and she needed immediate time off, and like a lot of it, a couple of weeks. And we had some projects coming down the pipeline. And I said, you know what? This is more important. We're going to put a pause on this. We'll reconvene when you get your kiddo back in shape. And then we'll figure out a new deadline, because it is not make or break. We are not doing brain surgery here. Somebody does not need me immediately.
Yes, we used to say that. I used to work in radio, so obviously there's a lot of pressure. It's fast paced. You're live on the air. But we used to always have this expression, like, no one's going to die on the table. Like, if we don't have a guest, we'll fill it with something. We'll play a clip. We'll talk. Like, it's fine. Like, this is not a life and death situation, but it can be made to feel like that, right? Like, our fight or flight response goes into overdrive and you start freaking out. But at the end of the day, like, and that doesn't mean you can be loosey-goosey. Like, you still want to try and hit those deadlines more often than not. But I think it's important to have a little bit of perspective.
Yes.
And know, like you said, what really matters. If your kid is sick, like if you've got a kid in daycare, oh my gosh, you're going to use all your sick days taking care of your child, and then they go back to daycare when they're well, and now you're sick and you have no PTO.
It's a never-ending cycle.
Exactly. So I think that's something that is not talked about enough, is even if you do have childcare, you don't have like backup childcare for when that kid's sick, right? Like, I don't know about, the women you work with, but my parents are still young, like they still work. So, if my kid can't go to daycare, well, it's not like I can lean on grandma and grandpa. Like, they still have jobs. They have to go to work themselves. So it's hard to build like that village that we always hear about, because I feel like when we were kids, our grandparents were retired. You had the neighbor down the street who, she didn't work, so your parents could lean on her. That's just not the case anymore.
Yeah, it really isn't. And for most of the women I work with, that is not the case. And a lot of them too have moved away from their families. So they don't even have that, even if their families are retired or accessible or available. And so we have to think also about things like flex time. We talk a lot about flex time, but you can't be a micromanager if you implement flex time. I'm going to say this with a lot of love. You cannot micromanage your people to death and say you have flex time. If you have something that needs to be done in a certain period of time, it's on us as the leader to say, this is the expectation, this is the due date. It's a pretty firm due date unless something really, out of the ordinary happens, and I need you to get it done. But I don't care if you get it done at 3 a.m. when you're up between feedings. I don't care if you get it done at 5 a.m. before the family gets up, or you do it at 7 o'clock at night, or you do it at lunchtime in the middle of the day. That's what true flex time is. That's allowing people to fit work into their lives where they feel good about it fitting. And sometimes we have seasons where we work really, really late at night, or we work really, really early in the morning, or we're cramming stuff in between, the nap time hustle, they call it. And that's okay. That's not sustainable long term, but it's also a season of life. And we need to be able to figure out, how do we support working moms in these crunch seasons where everything feels really heavy and really stressful and really overwhelming at times. And I think flex time is one of those opportunities that we can easily implement, and again, as a no-cost solution.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious why you wanted to work with women specifically, and how that sort of came to be. Like, for my own, I mostly work with women. I do work with some men, but the way I've chosen to position myself, all my branding is like hot pink. So it very much attracts.
We don't have to say it.
It attracts the girlies. Like, that's by design. And the men who do work with me are very cool with the very feminine approach. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of weeds out the red flags. So I'm curious why you were, gravitating towards women specifically.
Yeah, it really started with not feeling like I ever had enough support for myself. And I feel like I was in a very, like, you don't necessarily think about the grocery industry being male dominated, but it is incredibly a male dominated organization and industry. And, it's interesting because women are the ones that do most of the grocery shopping. Women are the ones that cook most of the meals. Women are the ones that, take care of family meals and snacks and lunches and all the things. But men are the ones that run the grocery industry. And so I always felt like, even within the context of a large organization, that I was often swept up in, you have to lead like your male counterparts. You have to, be more firm and more demanding and, like more serious. And I'm just not that person. I'm very compassionate. I'm very empathetic. I'm very bubbly and bright. And that just did not fit in that mold. And so I often felt unsupported. And I thought, if I ever have a chance to help other women step into their leadership roles, like hands down, that's what I want to do. And so when I, got into HR, I really emphasized women's leadership, and I got to be in positions where I got to support more women. And so I carried that over into my business. And I'm just like, men get it all. They have everything. They have access to all the tools, all the training, all the resources, all the mentorship, all the support. And women consistently lag behind in having access and opportunities in those areas. And so that's why I work with women.
I love that. I'm curious if you have experienced any pushback from, because let's face it, this leadership style that you and I have been discussing for the last 20 minutes is very new, very different for, the old boys club, the old establishment. How do you cope with or, coach management teams who feel like they're having a hard time giving up that control? Because I think that at the root of it is what it is, trusting your employees to get it done without you staring at them all day is relinquishing control. And that's really hard.
Yeah. And a lot of women who start businesses are very type A. Most of my clients are very type A, and they've got a stranglehold on things. And so that's part of sort of ongoing practice. We have to practice letting go. And I always say, don't give away the keys to your business on day one. You don't hire somebody brand new and then be like, okay, you're in charge of it all. That doesn't work. And that's a surefire way to set them up for failure and to set yourself up for disappointment and frustration. So start small, hire someone who can come in for a few hours a week and help you with mundane or tedious tasks like social media. You really can't break a lot in social media. Obviously, you need to have values alignment. You need to make sure that they're not posting stuff out there that's, completely in contradiction with your brand or your values, your vision, things like that. But, I even tell the story. Like when I was in charge of my own social media, I literally put in the bio. So my business name used to be Sprout HR, and I've changed it to just be my name. So Ashley Cox Leadership Mentoring. But when it was Sprout HR, I literally in the bio of my social media for, 6 months or so, had my email address as hell@sprouthr.co. So, you make mistakes, you make typos, your team will make mistakes and they will make typos. Everything doesn't need to be A+ work. Identify the areas in your business where A+ work is necessary. It's essential for your brand, for your reputation, for your client success. Everything else can be B+ work. It's okay. And so we have to really just like sit down and have a conversation with ourselves about what are those non-negotiable A+ tasks. And it can't be everything. I promise it's going to be like 5% of the tasks and 95% of everything else can be B+ work.
I love that. It's hard. You mentioned that a lot of entrepreneurs, specifically women, are type A personalities, but that's a good thing, right? I feel like it's hard to be an entrepreneur without that personality type because you need to be so organized. And I was actually at a client event yesterday and I was speaking to somebody who said like, oh, I'm not feeling fulfilled in my job and I want to change my job, but I could never do what you do. I could never start my own business because, I've got kids to feed and I like that security. And I'm like, I have a mortgage to pay. I have a kid to feed. I have a car payment. And if anything, I find that like a better motivator because failure is not an option. I have to feed my kid. I need to keep a roof over our heads. So, but that's not everybody, right? Not everybody can deal with that kind of pressure.
Yeah. And that's the thing, not everybody can. And thank goodness, because then we wouldn't have anybody who worked in our businesses with us and supported us. And for me, I'm not a super type A kind of person. I'm very much a more loosey-goosey, fly by the seat of my pants, creative person. Even though I've spent 20 years in HR and leadership, you would think I would have my life together. I don't. But that's why I hire people who do, who have that skill set. And so you don't need to, have people in your team who are exactly like you. You need people who complement your skill set. So to my energetic, outgoing, very kind of charismatic personality, my right-hand woman, Mara, is really, like, she's super like calm and steady. She's really organized. She is incredible with spreadsheets and data and information. And I'm like, can you get this organized for us? Because it's a hot mess, whatever I've thrown in this folder. And she's like, I'm on it. I got it. And then like, we look like we've got it together because we work really incredibly together. We have a strong relationship, and I let her be the expert that she is. And that's the key to delegating for success with your team. If you hire the expert, let them be the expert.
Great advice. Trust them. We're adults, right? Like, you hired people for a reason.
Yeah.
Ashley Cox can be found on Instagram at ashleycox.co. She is the person to consult if you want coaching to streamline your management style. If you're an entrepreneur who's trying to do it all, or you're heading up a larger operation, she's the person you want to get in touch with. You can also book Ashley to speak at events through her website, ashleycox.co. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Robin, for having me on Rebel Mom Boss. It was an honor to be here. What a great conversation. I hope that somebody finds inspiration and encouragement to lead in the way that they were meant to lead this week.
If you like what you heard today, make sure you follow and subscribe to Rebel Mom Boss with Robin Flynn wherever you get your podcasts. Oh, and make sure to leave a review, because that's how other moms will find the podcast too. Until next week.